everybody very much for finding your way here. This is a first for the Sydney Conservatorium of Music to hold a presentation here in the Charles Perkins Centre, which of course is named after one of our most distinguished Indigenous alumni of the University of Sydney. So I do have a message for you from Rachel Perkins, who was hoping to attend but has had to go to some meetings in Alice Springs. So she asked me to give her apologies and to hope that the lecture goes really well. So thank you all very much for coming along. So first of all, let me say that I'm very conscious that we are on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Pay my respects to all elders past and present, and especially to elders or youngsters from elsewhere in the world, Indigenous people who might be present here. Thanks very much for coming along. Today we're very lucky to hear from Dr. Payi Linda Ford, who I've known for a very long time now, very close friend of mine, but also one of the most original and interesting thinkers I know anywhere. So it's a great privilege to have her here to deliver the Alfred Hook Lecture. For those of you who don't know, the Alfred Hook Lecture Series is named after Professor Alfred Hook, who was actually the Professor of Architecture here at the University of Sydney, and was incredibly active in lots of different areas, and back in the 1920s and 1930s used to do public lectures at lunchtime about the world's music and play. He had a record player, and he'd play something different every week and talk about it to a general interested audience. So the quest that's enabled this lecture and other lectures in the series to take place comes from the Doreen Robson bequest and was named in his honour. It's very fitting, I think, that we have a public lecture being held in such a wonderful place with a wonderful Indigenous presenter. So let me introduce Dr. Payi Linda Ford, who is a Senior Research Fellow in the Northern Institute at Darwin University. She's a Rak Mak Mak Marranunggu woman whose traditional country is Kurrindju on the Finniss River in the top end, Northern Territory, between Finniss River and Reynold River regions. Her educational background draws on both Indigenous and non-Indigenous traditions. She received her PhD from Deakin University, and she is a current holder of one of the very highly sought after Australian Research Council Discovery Indigenous grants. So please join me in welcoming Payi to this to talk to us. Thank
you. So I've just spoken to Linda, acknowledging her story as being very good in my grandmother's language, which is Pandayal. And now I'm going to speak to you in my grandfather's language to acknowledge the ancestors of this country. Gajigal Pelu Kunikune Nene. So I'd just like to acknowledge the other Indigenous people in the room, and particularly my daughter, Emily Teman, and Jackie Troy, who's also part of the Nirikan and node leader for the theme that she and I are CIs on for an ARC Special Initiative grant, and she's going to talk a bit about that later. And Linda's worked with me and Alan Marrett and Sally Trelawney. Without all the background work that we've been doing over a number of years, I wouldn't have been able to get this ARC. And that's the story that I'm here to share with you today and pose some questions to you later. So thank you all for coming. I hope I don't disappoint you in what I share with you today. So this is New Ways for Old Ceremonies. It's an archival research project, and that stemmed from my mother's mortuary rites that we did she passed away in 2007, and in 2009 Linda, Alan and Sally Trelawney came along to help record that. And prior to all of that happening, of course, my mother, Ella, authorised all of that. So this is part of that story. So the structure was followed a process that hadn't been done before. So it was new ground, and I liken that to the Mirrwana and Wurkama ceremony that we do for harvesting cycads at particular ceremony times. And I negotiated that process with my mother back in 1998, when I started my PhD. And the PhD was based on Indigenous knowledge, and I was pregnant at the time with Emily. So the negotiation process was quite intense, and I think I wrote about 3 dissertations before settling on this Mirrwana and Wurkama principles. Okay, is that better? So the overview of the ceremonies that we undertook, drawing on the Mirrwana and Wurkama principles, was then embedded in the work that I've been carrying out. So using the old knowledge into creating the new ways of operating. And on the poster that you've got is a painting that I did with my mother and my 2 daughters, and my mother sung those paintings so that we claim the space of higher education through our own ceremony. So my mother sang the song, I clapped the nunga-nungas, and my daughters, my mother instructed them to do the wali, which is our dance. And that was done in the privacy of our home, and I regret today that I never recorded those songs, which I lament over enormously with Linda. So then we go to the ceremony when my mum passed away in 2007, just after I'd graduated with my PhD in 2006. She kept telling me to make the people at Deakin to hurry up and assess my PhD because she was unwell. Before she passed away, she'd been instructing myself, my brother and my sisters and my cousins about the ceremony that she wanted for her. She didn't want a burial ceremony. She wanted in the ground. She wanted a platform burial, mittar we call that. And so before we get to what you see up here, we went through a process of that from 2007 through to 2009. And what I've outlined here is what's happened in 2009. So here I just should tell you a little bit about 2007. So in 2007, we did, normally what happens is when somebody passes away, they go to the morgue, and legally they have to be put into a coffin, And when we have to seek permission to bury our family out on our country, so we did that. And so when we picked my mum up, we asked that we help the people at Simplicity Funerals to wrap her up in bulletin and paper bark. So, and then seal the lid and then take her back out the country. And as we enter our country, my brother took the lid off the coffin so that her spirit could be back on the country again. And then we had the funeral service at Wagait Falls in Litchfield National Park. And that particular place was significant for my mother because that was her initiation place. So it's a women's site. And so we had the Wagait Falls closed, and Alan and Linda came to that and brought along other family members that were the songmen and the helped us sing a lot of the songs for my mum's final departure to be put back on the country. And then after that had happened, the family members, close family members, took mum back to a place called Kurrindju. And I think in one of the paintings, I've done a painting of that for my PhD as well, but it's a centre, it's Mak Mak dreaming, which is our clan totem dreaming. So in the process of doing that, we took mum out of the coffin and put her, wrapped her up in more paper bark, and then took her out to Kurrindju and put her up on a platform that the family had built. And we did some ceremonies there, stayed with her for a number of days and nights, and then we left her there for almost 2 years for a number of reasons. Usually it's for 12 months or until the bulkum dries. And then we took her down in 2009 and cleaned all the remains and wrapped her again in new paper bark, bulletin, and put her into her final resting place at Kurrindju. And from there we travelled quite a way to Bachelor, or Rum Jungle, Meneling we call that place, to do the smoking and then to do the ceremony. But it was, it still is quite a significant thing that she did for us, because I've gone through a lot of the records and I haven't been able to find anything that describes this. So we did the smoking at Bachelor, we did the funeral at Nunjur, we did the Mita burial at Kurrindju, and then finally we did the Kapuk, the burnrag at Meneling. And in that ceremony, that took a long time to negotiate with different family members and because my mum had instructed us in 2006 that she wanted not just the Wanga ceremony, she wanted the Lirga ceremony and the Chanba ceremony to accompany her final journey to her to the walakandha. So, and it's a bit like the archiving plans in a lot of ways, and how that's linked to making sure that a lot of the stories that are told and the stories that are sung about and the stories that are performed is an ongoing archiving system of chikim of Aboriginal people, not just for us but for right around Australia. And now I'm trying to work out these new ways of archiving with the help of many people, like Linda and Alan and Jackie and Debbie and my own family members and extended family members from across the region, to make sure that this story is told in a way that's culturally appropriate for Aboriginal people. So this is dedicated to Allah and all the walakandha who helped us. And this is my mother dancing at the first song that Alan sung in Canberra. So that was pretty special. And when I saw Mum get up to dance, I was thinking, oh, this is pretty amazing that she's getting up to dance for Alan. Because earlier that day, we danced down at Iatzis on the banks of the, Lake Burley Griffin, with all the other Wanga ceremony performers. And my mum said, hurry up and get up now, in language. Ma, wally go, she said to me. And I looked at her and I looked at all the people around us, and we were the only two, and my two sisters, were the only ones there that were from the Wanga ceremony group that could do wali, and they hadn't brought down the women. They only brought all the men down to do Wanga. So that was pretty special. And that really meant a lot to me to see Mum get up to dance. For a non-Indigenous person who'd been adopted into our family by my brother, who has since passed away, to be part of the family. And here we are all these years later, 20 years later, still working together. So there's what I've basically described to you in what I talked about earlier, the final mortuary rites, when Mum had passed away, the preparations carried out by all the family, and with my brother Mana Atu, Frank Dummel. I won't say his name again, I've just got FD there. But with the burnrag for him has been done, and so respectfully I still acknowledge his name, but also because he was such an amazing performer, doing the Wanga dancing. He could just leap into the air from standing still about this high off the ground, and it was just amazing to see him perform. And he danced for my mother's Wanga ceremony, and he said, this is the last one and the last time I do this. And yeah, a very amazing and very smart man he was. So by my mum passing away and instructing me, as it turned out, to get all these people together, it took 2 years. The first 2 years, the first year when we'd planned it with my brother, his son and some other family members were in a car crash, and so we couldn't have it in that dry season in 2008. So we waited till later in the dry season, and then the senior lawman from this area here, Captain Wagait, who I call Uncle, my mum's brother, he had to go away to do ceremonies over in the Kimberley area, Kununurra, and then in 2009 everything fell into place, and that's why we were able to do the ceremony. So the video and the audio photographs recorded for the family by CDU and Darwin University and the University of Sydney team, Alan, Linda, Sally, and I can't remember her name, Julie Fairless, with additional material from my husband, Mark. So all these relationships were solidified, I guess, in this ceremony. So it had multiple layers of relationships and connections that really, you couldn't have planned it any better than how it turned out. And sometimes people say, oh, that's destiny or whatever. Well, I think it was the ancestors making sure that everything went right. The Mirrwana and Wurkama, the Indigenous knowledge framework used in my PhD thesis, and the book that I wrote in 2010 and other work, is all about this fruit that's produced by the cycad, which we call Mirrwana. And the palangu itself is the seed, and the nuts inside is the kernel, which we crush, and it takes a whole process to go through that. It's hard work, and your fingers go black from the cyanide that's in the fruit, and it's highly toxic and can not very good to eat it raw anyway, although the emus do eat it. So all the work that goes into that is called Wurkama. So here is a painting that I've done, that I told you about earlier, that I painted. And here is the male and female, because you need both to produce the fruit on the cycads. And this is the cycad trees. And this is the new knowledge that's created in the middle. And that's what I say that we're operating in now. And these are the fingers for shaking hands on new deals between Aboriginal knowledge and Western knowledge, and different generations of families or governments, it could be, or whatever, that's working towards creating new working relationships. And this is a land that's around where we work, or the place, or Nidin, or Wua, as we would say. So, and this is the pollination area of creating new forms of fruit, or as I say, the abundance of fruit for harvesting. And the more you look after your country and burn your country, the earlier you burn, the less fruit you get. The later you burn, the more fruit you get. So it's about knowing and understanding the country, and the links to research or to engaging Indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge. It needs care and nurturing. And so that's what that painting's about. And that's what us Marranunggu women dance to. My daughter's sitting over there going. So that's pretty important knowledge to share with younger generations, to make sure that transformation of intergenerational knowledge is continued through. And it's important to show them that you can work with non-Indigenous people like Linda and Alan, and Indigenous people from other countries like Jackie and other colleagues on the Nirrakan. Is important. It's important things that we're doing because it hasn't been done before. It's right on the cutting edge, and I can't get it any simpler than that. And it's very exciting, but it's very hard work to convince universities that Indigenous knowledge is important. And this is the Wurkama that I talk about in terms of Varagan Nan Pitwa, So that's about, the grass is ready to burn now. Like this time of the year, it's dry season. And you can see where the knock-em-downs have knocked down all the big tall spear grass, and it's all brown and it's screaming out to us, come and burn me. So we give it fire. And the fire is very important for us and important for sustaining all the animals and plants in that area. And as I said before, harvesting the palangru, the fruit. You can bust open the nuts to get the mimari, the kernel, and crush them. Place in thea, which is paper bark wrapping, to make woolen the package. And then you've got to tie it up quite tight. And then put it into nice running water, the water daddy, and then put it into the deep water, which is usually a little soaking place on the edge of the main watercourse, and leave it there for a couple of days to soften. And then you crush and rinse it again and repeat till all the milky colour has gone. And the final rinse in the flowing water, and you don't see any more of the milky colour coming out of the package. And that's just hard work getting the paper bark, let alone doing all that rest of the work. And you basically have to camp out there, need a water hole, and do that. And to prepare for all the big ceremonies that happened not so long ago, the work would have been incredibly difficult for all the women and all the kids. And to make sure that the kids didn't eat the stuff when it was raw, especially little toddlers that would be running around, because it's highly toxic. So, yeah. So then you bake it in the hot coals with stones or pandanus nuts and serve on mulungi leaves to senior ceremonial leaders in ceremonies. Only a little bit. So not long ago we trialled that, and it's very sweet, but on the outside it's very black. And yes, I must say it didn't do anything to me, but I only had a little bit, about half a teaspoon, I think. I wasn't game to eat more because of this. If you get any of this wrong, it can be fatal. And I can recall as a child growing up in the dry season when we'd go hunting for blue tongues and possums, we'd pick up the cycad nuts after the burn, after they dried, and you could shake it and hear them rattling around, and then you could eat that without going through this big process. But not a lot of them, because that could happen. And I dare suspect that's why a lot of my family have problems with our joints today. So anyway, important places. In 2007, the Darwin Hospital was where my mum had passed away. Nucky's Lagoon was where we did a lot of the negotiation with all the ceremony people. And Linda and Alan were part of that with Sally. Bachelor, we did the smoking of my mum's house and the office and all our cars and all of us, all the family members and friends, close friends and other relatives. Nunju, which is Wagait. Wagait is our traditional name for an area, but it's low down on the creek. Nunju is the actual waterfall, is where the funeral was. And Pandayal is where we moved Mum out of the coffin to take her in the wrap her up in the thea, to take her to Kaungari, to her final, one of her second last final resting place. So this is where it all started, Darwin, Nucky Lagoon, and then down to, Bachelor, and from Bachelor out to Nunjur, then to Pandayal, and then to Kangari. But the ceremony is, people are from all these areas here. So, and that's a 10-hour driving trip to Wagait, one way. It's not a very easy drive either, it's all dirt, four-wheel drive tracks. So in 2009 we went to Nambu, which is Daly River Mission, Palampa, which is down here, to Wagait, to Nadadi, Pandayal, and Wurikapuldia. And Pepe is where the main meeting place was for a lot of these people to come to, so that we could pick them up to take them back to Nambu, and then we took a shortcut through Litchfield Park to Pandayal. So in 2009. So the introduction to the family, and my brother and I had organised through Darwin University to have vehicles, and we drove down in the morning, got there at lunchtime, waited for people here, and it was dark when we were driving back through here, and they sang all the songs all the way through there, that country. And I think we stayed up all that night. I think all in all I got about 2 hours sleep in 48 hours. So it was very intense. So you can see this area here is like the Wanga area, and Lirga, and the Chanba area down here. So growing up, I can recall all of these ceremonies being performed just outside of Bachelor at a place called Meneling. And those ceremonies more or less stopped in the 70s, and then by my mum passing away, she wanted those back, and that's what she got. And I think if it wasn't for all the people that were working together, we wouldn't have had made that happen. Yeah. So Kurrindju was the final mortuary place for the Mitar, and Meneling was the final Kapuk ceremony. The ceremonies and the people and the languages are Wanga, Lidga and Chanba. I think we worked out there were about 9 different language groups that performed in that ceremony. And often people think that Aboriginal languages, because it's in the same region, are the same. Well, I cannot understand Murunpata, which is what Chanba is sung in. Maranga is the songs that were sung for the Lirga by Uncle Captain. Prudence sang her songs, Chanba songs, in Murunpapa, and Wanga songs were sung by Charles Kungieng in Marajavan, which is a lot closer to the Marathia language, which I spoke to you before. That's my grandmother's language. And Marranunggu is a different language again. So it's interesting. So these are the languages, Marachavan, Maraamu, and the related languages are Marathia and Marranunggu. Maranga is different again, although it's similar to Maradan, which is another language again. But we all belong to the Marawarga area. So, and that's what unites us as a regional group. And that's the point that my mother was making, I think, in her passing instructions. So these are all the different language group speakers here. And that's at Pandayal. And that's Uncle Captain, that's Charles, Mark, properly, Martin. There's me hiding over here. And my cousin there. And because Mana had passed away, we didn't want to expose his photo in this presentation. But these are his grandchildren up here. Mm-hmm. So that's a song, walakandha song, and Linda and Alan have published a book on this with Liz Ford. And here they were having a practice run before the actual dancers got up to perform. And here at the back are family members. And this is at Kangari, my mum's final resting place. A certain walakandha is living there for a whole year. Kubuwemi, my dear country. There is a solitary house, which is a mitta, with a white roof there. Kubuwemi, my dear country. So this is honouring my mother in her final journey. And Alan sung for my mother at that ceremony. This is a billabong that's always got water in it. And these are all my immediate family members dancing from my mother. And there's me and my mum's younger sister, Daly, and my sisters and my nieces. And there's Emily, who's sitting down the front. And up here is a hill, is where we put Mum. So the coffin here is empty, and this is in now 2009. And this is a Kapuk burnrag at Meneling. So what we do is we gather all the materials of the deceased and put them around the hole that is to be burn the materials of the deceased in an enclosed circled area with all the material. And this pile over here is all the artefacts that my mother had made. There's different family members coming and we're welcoming them. And this is Sally Trelawney, who was a recorder, recording the songs with Julie at the time. And these are family members from the Maratial family group. And the paint is significant here with the honeybee and representing fire. And this is Mabel, my cousin. And this is our Nana. He's a big boy now. And these are all the Wanga men, and Lirga and Chanda. And here's Alan. And these are all the family from all those areas that we know. This is my cousin and my nephew's in there. So these are my two brothers and my mate. I can't see who that is. Call this old man Daddy, and my uncle. And there's the men singing the song. Why won't that song come on? Walakandha, playing before. So this is again shotgun, the Canby man. I was telling Alan before he can't play anymore because he doesn't have his front teeth. But he was very, very good player. So there's some of the artefacts that were made and were distributed to the ceremony people. So these are the men performing Lidga now. And there's Linda and Liz Ford. And there's all my family members over here. And there's the material being burnt, and they're performing the dances around that. And this is part of the smoking ceremony that they were performing, and as that was being performed, we had to move through the smoke. And then after that, we cover up the remains of the burn material. So here we put the landfill back in, and then on top of that we put sand. And on the cover of my book is a painting of that, the sand on top of my mum's burnrag Kapuk ceremony. And the men dance on it, and then the women come in and dance on it, and that's done a number of times over. So there's Emily, who's a big girl now, and her sister and her cousins, and he's my auntie, Mary, who led the women in the dancing. Very important role to play in the protocols of how to undertake those ceremonies. And my niece this particular niece hadn't been part of the ceremony before, and that's her mother, who is German, hadn't been part of a ceremony before. because they were smiling, they were in trouble and got roused at. And they couldn't understand why, just having a smile, being part of the ceremony, was such a offence. So I had to pull them aside and tell them not to be showing their teeth at that particular ceremony, even if it was in good gesture about smiling. It's not culturally appropriate. So for the ceremony, I had my hair shaved off and put in with my mother's remains, and other family members had their hair cut and put in there as well. And I don't know if you noticed before, but all the children and relations of the deceased wore yellow and the visitors wore red, like Linda wore red. Although my mum's younger sister, I think she took hers off and just was more comfortable in her dress. So we all wore that yellow. So these are some of my nieces and sister cousins. And here we're doing the chukpi ceremony, which is a cleansing, using the water in the drum. And the women and men all line up and come through to get washed. So in that ceremony, I should go back. In that ceremony there, my mum was called up to do that, and my brother called out to me to come and help, which I was quite honoured about and taken aback, because I thought that other senior people like my older sisters were there as well, and sister cousin. I thought that he would have called them, but so I felt quite honoured, and still feel honoured that he did that. And that makes this work all the more important to get it documented. Because as I said to Linda and Alan at that time, I think that those ceremonies are probably the first and last time they will be recorded. And so it's important to make sure that that's now documented, and that transgenerational knowledge flow is continued on from my mother and my brother and other family members through me onto younger generations of Marranunggu, but also all Australians, so that they can see that those old ceremonies are still being practiced. Maybe not the same as the old ways, although I did find some of Stana's work just last week that had the same sort of processes, very similar processes that we were instructed by my mother to follow. But in his, there was only one ceremony, but I don't know that he knew that the difference between all the ceremonies. At least I haven't found that in his notes yet about whether he understood that there were different ceremonies, like Wanga, Chadamba and Lirga. And Alan, if you spoke to Alan later and Linda, you'd probably find that there's many other ceremonies that are performed. And some of those ceremonies are gender-specific ceremonies that aren't for public knowledge. So this is the Mirrwana and Murkama process applied to ceremony collection. And as you can see here, this is burning the country, gathering the fruit, crushing the kernel, placing the packages in the water, checking to see if the fruit is softened, grinding it up on the big grinding stones, and we've still got those grinding stones, cooking the meal into lawa, and then eating it. But that's our way of doing things. But when I relate it to research and what I do here in the university environment or in other research projects that I do, the activities are about bringing about ceremonies recorded and funding for the work. So for the ARC, it's about preparing all the records prior to submitting your grant application. The preparatory work, sorting out and editing the recordings, making sure that, you know, all your ethics are completed in a timely and culturally appropriate way, and then editing those records that you collect from your data collection. Applying the Indigenous knowledge about significant creating metadata and links is the work about, once the work has been recorded, like this work that you've just seen and heard, is recorded and documented and put into a safe keeping place like Paradisic and IATSIS or at the Darwin University, and making sure that those protocols are appropriate for my family, but also for the extended family and for the universities and the agencies that have that responsibility of making sure those repositories are kept in a safe place. Monitoring progress, gathering new Indigenous perspectives, the workshops that are undertaken. So what I do is see how we went and got the people, and even travelling through the country singing the songs, that's not just travelling. I consider that to be like a workshop because you're learning all this new knowledge that's being created as you're travelling. And they're singing the country as you're travelling through. And by talking about it here, I don't give it justice unless you actually experience that event. There's no way of really articulating it clearly to you what it means. It's just an amazing spiritual lift that I just can't articulate it clearly enough to you, what that meant to me at that particular time and what it meant to me now in driving me and motivating me to do the work that I do in this space. Monitoring progress, gathering new Indigenous perspectives workshop, preparing dissemination versions of the collection. So that's that sifting process of what can be put out into the public space, what shouldn't be. So putting restrictions on things, or even not even putting anything out into the public domain at all. Placing the collection into website and publications, and that work is really important, and it's who's there to do that work under the right guidance. And that's what I mean about working with Linda and Alan and Jackie and giving young people like Emily instructions about how to do these things in a culturally appropriate way. And it strengthens young people's identity and about who they are as Indigenous people. Sharing with the right people to enable ongoing vitality and respect, and the launch of the ceremony. So that's over the 3 years of the ARC, and I always think about any research projects that I get, I think, oh God, working with blackfellas, oh my God, those people that write those policy documents for ARC haven't got a clue about how to be flexible. But I think I'm educating them slowly to be much more flexible and to think about the things that are in an Aboriginal person's world that isn't the norm for other Australians. because of the socio-economic issues, I guess. But anyway, that's another story. We won't go there at the moment. Reflective auto-ethnography for myself. So this is a paperback. Indigenous knowledge methodologies, the Mirrwana. So that's the theorising of all of the things that I've just explained to you previously. The Palangu, choosing and sorting, applying Indigenous knowledge, database, metadatabase. And then here's all the little packages sitting in the wuratadi, in the little billabong on the side of the creek. And then the monitoring process and filtering when it gets into the running stream. And that's where we sort out what's good to put up on the website or to make CDs or to make recordings. And there's all the little cakes or biscuits or lawa, as we call them. And then archiving that information as well into preservation repositories like IATSIS or Paradisic or CDU, Sydney University. And that's a public knowledge and a restricted knowledge. So framing the archival process, the ingestion, management and dissemination through the Mirrwana and Wukama Indigenous Knowledge Framework is theorised on Indigenous knowledge, on Mak Mak Marranunggu knowledge. And when I presented that to Deakin University in my dissertation, not as it is now in this framework, they said to me, we don't understand that. And I said, that's okay, because I think I would like to also request my mother to be on my supervisory panel as one of my supervisors. And they said, oh, that's never been done. And I said, well, can we do that? Because none of you speak Marranunggu or Marathia, and you don't have Indigenous knowledge. And they couldn't argue against that. And that was one of the first Australian universities ever in this country to accept a community member without a PhD to be on a supervisory panel for a HDR, PhD research project. So when I told my mother that, she said, that mean you can write a book for me now? And I went, oh my God. Because Debbie Rose had written a book for us called Country of the Heart. And when I showed her my PhD in 2005, she said, that's not a book, because she wanted it to be colourful, like the Country of the Heart. And I said, yeah, it's a thesis. It's our story. It's about, that's what you told me to get right. And that's what you were growling me about, making sure, going through, selecting the right metaphor to use for the PhD. She said, okay. And so my promise to her was to make sure that I put that in a colourful bound book, which I did in 2010. So the expansion to other projects is the Chicken Language Workshop, which was a workshop that Linda, Allen and I worked on with family members in conjunction with RNLD, Margaret Flory and Co, and a follow-up to a small grant that Linda and I and Alan had got through Darwin University for the Chicken Language project for caring for ceremony. And that, in that workshop, Emily came up with the idea that she didn't really like the mentoring approach through RNLD, and she was learning Spanish and said, I learned my Spanish on a smartphone at Mum. And I said, that means I have to write a grant for that. So that's what I did to Nirakan through the node that I was in with Jackie Troy, the history and language node. And so we got our first grant through that. And I engaged Ian Green, a linguist, who worked on the Pandayal and other Daly languages to help, and Bruce Birch, who was a crowdsourcing designer, to help start this project. So that's what we've started. It's a long way from finished. We still need more funds to create the smartphone itself. It's very highly technical. I've applied the Mirrwana and Wilkema principles to all of these projects. The Fisheries Research Development Corporation project at Warrawee, it's about aquaculture. Pretty amazing, isn't it? To apply that to somewhere completely different, in a different region in Western Arnhem Land, different language speakers, they speak Mal, and to apply this method there was a high risk, but it paid off because I was able to talk to them about the Wilkema and Mirrwana principles, and they were able to relate that to their own metaphors about the Macassans coming to Goulburn Island to do aquaculture, harvesting trepangan for that project. Plant biosecurity, I work on that, building resilience in Indigenous communities through engagement. And I was able to engage with Kathy Guttajaka from Elko Island, which is over in East Arnhem Land. And we were able to combine our thinking about the Ngatu in her language and my language, Mirrwana, to combine the two theorising about the cycad and then relating that to the Maori karaka nut that is also very highly toxic, and they go through a similar process. And we were able to sit, the three of us, to combine the thinking and extract from that the principles that we would use for plant biosecurity working with scientists. And so now we're put in for an extension to that project that's going into this year and next year. So that's pretty exciting to be able to work on these using those old ceremonies to inform what we're going to do now and into the future. And so there's a language workshop. This is at the Northern Institute. There's Emily and her big bright ideas. And there's other family members working around the table, Linda and I, and there's all the songs that we were talking about those and how to annotate them and index them, which is a very complex process. But here in the background is one of my paintings, and this particular place here is where my mother is at Kalngari. And this is a seasonal fire regime. The big yellow, the orange dots are the cool burns, and the smaller dots that you can see are the late burns. So you get an idea about, this is when the country dries out quickly, and these are the floodplains. So they have a different burning technique. So it's about knowing your country and understanding it and how to utilise it to get the best out of what's there. And this is the model that we produced for the plant biosecurity project. And so the traditional cycad process, and here in these diagrams is the actual process that I went through to demonstrate what is required to get to the final product, the lawa. And here we've used Gapapuinga language to highlight the principles in their language to understand the deep meaning and the layers of what it means to engage respectfully in this process. And over here is the Western ideas and the visual representations for people to look at and to understand the links between the two and the principles that are involved. And these are the principles as you go around the circle. So that was really exciting to get worked out. But always when you're writing up your research grants, it's really important that the ethics process is a two-way process. And that's what my painting represents. Those two psychiatries, the female and male, to bring that together in both cultures is really, really important. So getting the story right is what I learnt from my mother's teachings about our Mak Mak Marranunggu knowledge, and I think she's given me some pretty amazing principles to work by, and she got to pass those on to her grandchildren. And so these are the acknowledgements of all of those things and the projects that have helped me to get to where I am here today. So, mamak, yeah? So mamak is our word for goodbye. So, but Wagait. So I'm saying to you in Marathea, my story's finished. But I hope it's given you something to think about, and I hope I haven't disappointed you in telling my story about how important the research journey has been for me. Going from an undergrad student in universities to post PhD there's no such thing as stop learning, because it's just ongoing. So thank you for coming.
Please join me in thanking
Thank you.